Hello, it's Melody again. Thank you for coming back. Today, I hope to go over the four primary cognitive functions of an INFJ. Just to give you a little bit of background, there are eight cognitive functions under Myers Briggs. But the way that the personalities work is that you have your primaries, which are the first four, and that's sort of what determines little um, personal quirks and mannerisms that make you your personality type. And then you have your shadow functions, which are sort of the when you're not yourself one day and you do something that you wouldn't normally do, and you're like, whoa, why am I behaving that way? That's one of your shadow functions. And maybe I'll make a video about shadow functions later. But today let's just focus on the primary ones, okay? Alrighty. So INFJs are considered to be, on top of being the most unique, a lot of different sites and forums think of them as the empaths or the sidekicks. And that's because the functions of INFJs and how they stack up really lend itself to INFJs being very intuitive, having very strong foresight, sometimes to their detriment, but I'll get to that. They sort of use this foresight to inform um, their opinions and interactions with different people. And they're very much the systematizers of individuals and human interaction, whereas INTJs, which is very similar to INFJs, um, systematize ideas or concepts and not so much humans. um, we're we INFJs were really good at trusting our guts and following our gut intuition, and we work really hard to sort of be true to ourselves and our values. Um, Sometimes this hurts us because we may push people away or have a hard time making friends or things, but ultimately, INFJs would rather be authentic to themselves and their character than portray a false self, if you will. Um, and this sort of drive for authenticity sometimes makes us come across as very private and withdrawn, but it's really just INFJs being in their mind and very complex, ensuring that their values and morals add up to a reasonable end. So that's sort of the 30,000 foot view of what INFJs look like. But the reason they look like that plays into their primary cognitive functions. So INFJs, well, let me back up. The four cognitive functions, you sort of have your primary function, which is what you walk through the world, um, walk through the world experiencing. Okay, then you have your sort of supportive function. So on top of how you see the world, it's more so how you express yourself. Your third function is how you relieve yourself, if you will. So when you sort of have time alone, what do you do with your thoughts, or what do you do with the experiences that you came across once you expressed yourself? And then your fourth function is more so, I think of it as what you have to work on to improve um, the first three functions. INFJs lead with their introverted intuition. Introverted intuition is a function that helps types that have it sort of um, realize and explore the implications and transformations of the world. You're very much in your mind saying, how does this work? How will it work? If this happens, will that happen? And you're constantly um, taking in possibilities and what it means to you. Not so much what it could mean for others. That would more so be extroverted intuition. Extroverted intuition would be you seeking possible answers and what it means for everything. Um, INFJs and INTJs sort of, they're very intuitive, but it mostly is intuitive for how it may affect them. What's the implication on me for doing this? likely outcome if I do this to myself, which is why INFJs and INTJs, which is also another very rare type, seem very withdrawn and guarded because we're constantly trying to figure out the implications of self versus the implication of the external, if that makes sense. Where INFJs and INTJs differ, however, is their supportive function. So they share the same primary function of introverted intuition. But where INTJs and INFJs differ is that INFJs use extroverted feeling and INTJs use extroverted thinking. And I'll just go into the extroverted feeling. INFJs may experience the world through introverted feeling and taking in information, the implications of how it may affect them. But how they release or express this sense of the world is through extroverted feeling. And so they'll take in information on how it affects themselves, excuse me. Southern dialect, just blur everything together. They take in information on how it may affect them and the implications of how it may affect them. But INFJs will express it by considering the feelings of the group, which is sometimes a good thing. We're very empathetic and diplomatic. We try very hard to be thoughtful and considerate. We don't like hurting people's feelings, even if we try to be true to ourselves. Where this sometimes backfires for INFJs is that, let's say, for instance, we know in our hearts or in our minds that something isn't right for us. And instead of leading with that and understanding it and just living that truth, as INTJs may, because they're more logical and they express themselves through logic, INFJs will say, well, before I do this thing or live this way that makes sense for me, let me play it back and see how it may affect other people. And this is sometimes kind of that struggle with INFJs because we don't want to hurt other people, but at the expense of ourselves, we almost care too much of what other people may think. And it's just something that INFJs constantly struggle with and have to deal with. I personally have that issue of where I know in my heart what works and what doesn't work for me. But instead of me just living that way, sometimes I'll pause and take a moment and ask this person and that person, almost seeking approval to make sure that living my life is okay, which is probably a big reason why I and many INFJs oftentimes feel very secluded. Even if we're very social and lively, we're part of a group, we're very, very conflicted in living our truth versus community consensus, if you will. And we realize this struggle because our relief function, number 3, is introverted thinking. So as I said earlier, INTJs express themselves through their second function of extroverted thinking. So they live their life through logic. They move through the world understanding themselves and expressing themselves concretely. This is who I am, this is how I live, and these are the reasons why. It makes sense. INFJs, their third function is introverted thinking. So similar to INTJs, we'll analyze and categorize, systematize what we know and our logic and our thinking, but we won't do it primarily. We won't do it in expressing ourselves. We'll do it to relax. So when we're by ourselves, like in our house, or you see that common stereotype of the INFJ holding coffee and looking out of the window, maybe it's raining or maybe it's like a somewhat overcast day, we're thinking. We are thinking non-stop. And we're analyzing our experiences with others and trying to see if it makes sense and aligning it with our internal values and principles, which we determined from our primary function of introverted intuition. So if you can kind of see where it stacks up, we lead with introverted intuition. So we take in experiences and realize the implications of it for ourselves. We go out into the world with these implications to see how they play back against others. And then when we're back alone, what we do is that we analyze those interactions and see if they line up. And it's during this period of introverted thinking that INFJs can sometimes suppress themselves, because if in analyzing their experiences and categorizing them according to their principles, if they don't line up, we can get extremely upset and melancholy. So sometimes you'll see INFJs by themselves, and we're just like, the entire time, because we're so deep in thought as to, am I truly living to my principles? Am I being my authentic self? Am I not being hypocritical? And we're doing this the entire time nonstop. So it's just something that we're constantly in progress of. It's not something that will, and I don't know if other types do this necessarily, but you'll see one type say, okay, I'm going to take time to think, and then I'll get back to X, Y, or Z. INFJs at all times are thinking of implications, considering the group, and analyzing their experiences on a loop almost. Um, so we're very, what's the word I'm trying to think of that's not too mean? Neurotic? Neurotic would be the exact word. We're extremely neurotic in our thoughts and feelings at all times. And this can sometimes read to others as selfish, on top of being withdrawn, because we would rather be in our heads and line up what our thoughts and feelings are, even though we say we're considering the group. If your first two functions, in my opinion, are introverted, you're really primarily thinking about yourself. Um, just something to think about. The final function is extroverted sensing. This is where INFJs suffer. Extroverted sensing is experiencing. The way I think of extroverted sensing is that you're observing and experiencing the world in the present. So acting in, based on what's currently in front of you. So something that INFJs are, as I said earlier, we're about foresight, and we're very empathetic, and people consider us almost like sidekicks. Well, if you suck at being in the present, um, you very much put the cart before the horse oftentimes, because you're thinking about implications, you're considering other people and what they may think of your views or your thoughts or your feelings, and you're analyzing those said potential thoughts and feelings, and you're constantly doing this, if you will. It's very much a loop. And so in that loop, you're not thinking about what's right in front of you. And so that's why INFJs oftentimes suffer very severe anxiety. You can't be anxious about the present. You're only anxious about the past, the implications of what has happened, or the future, which is potential implications. So while INFJs are considered to be sidekicks, um, sometimes we seem kind of aloof because we're not thinking about what's in front of us. So sometimes INFJs may come across as clumsy, or I've been called ditzy once because I was thinking so extremely about, well, what happens if I don't remember my password? Do I have to get a new computer? Do I have to buy a new computer? Do I have the money to buy a new computer? Instead of just saying, oh, my password is this. And that was maybe 20 minutes of pure stress. And I really could just pause and said, okay, what's in front of me? Let me figure this out now before rushing off and jumping to all these conclusions. And my INTJ friend is always telling me to like, shut up. What's happening right now? Stop freaking out. I'm very used to people saying that. But we can't really help ourselves because, as you now know, all of our functions line up in such a way where, while it helps us to constantly see into the future, like we're actually psychic, but to constantly consider the future and what it means for both ourselves and for the people around us, um, it can serve as to our detriment, in that we don't appreciate the things we currently have. Uh, my personal suggestions for INFJs who feel anxious or want to know more about their patterns, think about when you're particularly anxious about something, where on your cognitive process list are you freaking out? I usually freak out primarily between introverted intuition, where I'm taking in and understanding potential things, and extroverted feeling, like what does this mean for others? So if you're the kind of person who, says, well, I don't want to hurt so and so's feelings, before you jump to that conclusion of you will hurt their feelings by telling someone the truth or how you feel about something, just trust that you only know what you know right now, and you'll deal with it then, which is the most painful thing for an INFJ, but I assure you, your life will be so much easier once you reach that end. And potentially, I'll likely make a video on suggestions for dealing with anxiety as an INFJ, because I think few people understand just how anxious INFJs can be, and we're very good at masking it because, again, we're considering the group and we don't want to make other people uncomfortable. So I'd like to make a video about that. But in the meantime, I hope you enjoyed this video, and I hope it was educational and insightful and gave you a little bit of a background in how blah, blah, in how INFJs think. Thank you so much for watching, and I hope that you follow my page. Thank you.